when cocky fighters get owned and destroyed. It's always satisfying to watch cocky fighters run their mouths at the beginning only to end up getting destroyed. You'd think that at some point these fighters would learn not to celebrate early or maybe even talk a lot less before getting in a match. But unfortunately, that's never been the case, and thankfully, we get to sit back and enjoy these embarrassing moments when the cockiest of fighters get owned. Without further ado, let's get to our roundup for today's video. 1. Charles Bennett versus Michael McDonald. Being a fighter requires a certain level of confidence, but these cocky fighters always enjoy exceeding it. We can clearly see this in Charles Bennett during his fight against Michael McDonald. At the beginning of the match, Bennett's confidence carried him on, and he was doing pretty well. While going at McDonald's, Bennett was also taking blows that didn't seem to faze him. Unfortunately, in just seconds, Bennett found himself in a terrible position. The punch he'd swung towards McDonald's hard jaw had a reverse effect on his hand. So with diminishing confidence and a broken left hand, Bennett had no choice but to throw in the towel. 2. Anan versus Michaelovich. You sure can run your mouth all you want, but taking cheap shots is a bad idea that should never cross your mind. Well, Anan probably wasn't aware of that when he chose to take a cheap shot at Michaelovich before the match started. Michaelovich, on the other hand, decided to reserve his response for later in the fight. A few minutes into the fight, you can see Michaelovich serving a left jab straight to Anan's face. That jab alone was enough to completely destabilize Anan. We've got to give it to Anan for remaining in the fight for much longer than expected. However, after the humbling jab that mashed up his brain, he definitely was running on autopilot till the referee called it in. Watching Michaelovich continue to batter Anan sure would have been an incredible sight, but the referee thought otherwise. 3. Douglas Lima versus Michael Payne. Of course, Page has had a record of trying to make a fool out of his opponents, but this fight with Lima wasn't one of those fights that went his way. This fight started off quite slowly, and as usual, Page didn't stop bouncing around the canvas like it was some kind of joke. After spending most of the first round trying to avoid getting knocked out, you'd expect Page to get a grip on his cockiness. Well, that wasn't the case. By the start of the second round, Page was back at it with moves similar to those used by street fighters. Paying close attention to Page, Lima waited for the perfect moment and immediately swept Page off his feet. What followed was an insane knockout with Lima leaving no room for escape with his heavy punches. This was enough to teach Page to stay still. Or maybe not. Page's loss in this match completely ruined his undefeated record. Well, with his attitude, this humbling moment was long overdue. 4. Trinidad versus Ricardo Mayorga. Acting all indestructible in the ring is something I personally will not advise, but Ricardo Mayorga doesn't seem like someone who's used to taking good advice. Starting off the first round, Trinidad took the lead with a ruthless left hook on Mayorga. And how did Mayorga respond? He proceeded to drop both his hands, letting down his defense and sticking out his chin in the air for another. Was this an effect of the blow or just a cocky move to prove a point? I'd like to believe it could have been both. Well, none of that mattered to Trinidad. Taking advantage of the opening, he continued with 3 more left hooks. This time, Mayorga's response was to dance arrogantly, acting as if he had barely been touched. By the end of the 5th round, Mayorga had sustained an injury, and holding himself in place was very hard. So much for acting indestructible. Trinidad, on the other hand, continued charging at him till the 5th round ended. The 6th round took quite a turn as Mayorga was back on his feet and fighting back hard. However, he had little energy to spare that could only sustain him until the 8th round. I guess we can give it to him for surviving that long, but by that time, Trinidad had already scored 3 knockouts, automatically winning the fight. 5. Charles Latu Parisa versus Sultan AlNaimi. Latu Parisa most definitely has some of the best dance skills. However, he's got to know the difference between a dance battle and a boxing fight. Trying to impress the spectators in Dubai, he pulled off some of his best dance moves and probably forgot the real reason he was there. Unfortunately, barely a minute into the first round, and it was obvious that Sultan was in complete control of the fight as he battered Latu Parisa. Sultan served a left hook to Latu Parisa's torso and directed a right hook to his jaw, completely flooring him for the second time. Following these brutal hits, Parisa tried his best to beat the count, but could barely find his way back to his feet. Are we disappointed that all that performance went to waste? Sure, but it certainly won't be the first time or even the last. 6. Jason R. Solomon versus Amitesh Chavi. If you're going to clown your opponent in a fight, the best you can do is to at least win the fight. But in more cases than not, these cocky fighters always get destroyed in the most humiliating ways ever. Jason Solomon's case wasn't any different from this in his fight against Amitesh Chavi. Solomon had an entire entrance dancing to the ring with the worst attitude and very high confidence. You could say Solomon was doing the most, swinging around in the cage while basking in the crowd's cheers. If only he had a clue how the night was about to change so quickly. If you've seen any Chavi fights, you'll know how intense his punches are. So, in this fight, all Solomon had to do was avoid Chavi's knockout by all means necessary. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like Solomon got the memo, or maybe he didn't take it seriously. A little homework would have helped him last a little longer in this fight, but clearly he didn't do his. Not a wise move, Solomon. Just after the first bell, both fighters moved to the center of the cage. Solomon started off with the first strike, or at least made an attempt. However, Chavi held him off with an overhand that had Solomon on the canvas. As you'd expect, Chavi won the fight, but that was after he gave Solomon a series of fists to the face till they were separated by the referee. 7. Joe Smith versus Bernard Hopkins. Some people can talk the talk, but unfortunately can't walk the walk. One such person is Bernard Hopkins. Right before his fight against Joe Smith in December 2016, Hopkins took his time to analyze all of the things he was going to do to Smith. But unfortunately, all of that backfired. The fight went on till the 8th round when Smith rained his most brutal blows on Hopkins till he fell out through the ropes to the floor and straight into retirement. While he may have been able to get back on his feet, he was too perplexed to get himself back into the ring before the count to 20 was over. Hopkins walked around for some time, wondering where he got it all wrong. We could list a few places, starting from running his mouth before the fight. But he won't be the first to do such. In fact, let's look back at a much similar case. 8. Mike Tyson versus Peter McNeely. In August 1995, after a 4-year layoff, the legend Mike Tyson was back to professional boxing, set to face Peter McNeely. As unrealistic as this may sound, this battle lasted for only 89 seconds. In just the first 10 seconds after the bell rang, Tyson had already served a straight that had his opponent down on the canvas. 20 seconds later, and Tyson had done it again. This time, the legend went in with a right uppercut that once again had McNeely on the ground. At this point, it was obvious that Tyson had done some damage to McNeely during the fight. To prevent any more damage than the one already inflicted, McNeely's manager immediately sprung into the ring while the referee ended the match. To think this was the same man that told the world to watch him kick Tyson's ass. Well, we all saw how that ended, didn't we? With that, we've come to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, do well to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. Thank you very much for watching.